Welcome everybody to the final in our career success series for spring 2022. This workshop is career launch. As you may or may not know, we work on 4 phases of career development, which are explore, prepare, implement, and career launch. And so this topic under career launch today is negotiate your salary effectively. If you have questions as we go, please feel free to drop them in the chat. You can use the raise hand function and we can certainly have you unmute and chat with us as we go. We have a lot of content to try to pack in here, but we want to make sure that we're answering your questions and your concerns. So if you have anything that you'd like us to cover at this time, please do feel free to jump in and let us know. At the end of the presentation, there will be a little survey. If you can stick around until the end and fill it out, that would be wonderful. We will also be sending it out by email afterwards if you have to leave before the end. So, just by way of introduction, my name is Lynn Lease. I am the Director of Career Education here at Mercy. And if Samantha has a moment, I know you're in the chat.
Yes, no problem. Hi, everyone. I know several of you here on the call tonight, so it's great to see some familiar names. My name is Samantha Karpoloff. I'm the Assistant Director on the team, and I work with students mainly in the School of Business. It's great to be here.
And so we are, of course, both from Career and Professional Development at Mercy. Our website is career.mercy.edu. And if you would like to follow up individually with a career coach on this topic or anything else related to your career path, please do feel free to reach out. You have our emails there. We can always connect you to the right person. Samantha, would you like me to review our agenda?
Do you mind?
I don't mind at all. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the job search landscape, just understanding all the factors that are coming into salary negotiation. We want you to know your worth. So we're going to talk about researching salaries and the marketplace. We're going to help you define your need. So when you go into a job conversation, you have a sense of what the range is that you would be asking for. And then just some tools to advocate for yourself in this process. So just to do some level setting, we now are at our link. So we're going to ask you all to participate in our poll. It is pollev.com. I apologize. It's in the chat correctly. pollev.com/linlease007. Or if you are texting in, you can start by texting linlease007 to the number 37607. I'm actually going to stop sharing here if everyone has that. And I'm going to pull up our poll. Just curious for everyone in the room, what salary negotiation looks like for you. So if you've been in the position so far, if you've gone through a job offer process, have you negotiated your salary before? Do you tend to? Or if you haven't been there yet, what's your plan? Are you thinking about it right now? Is this something that you always walk in expecting to do? Is it something that you sometimes do depending on the scenario, or that you never do? We'll give everyone a minute to make sure that you can participate. Yeah. Okay, it looks to me like probably everyone who is contributing is going to, and I have to tell you, this is so consistent with what is happening in the job market. So it looks like 11% of you are saying always. I go in, I always am expecting to negotiate. Some of you, 33% are saying sometimes, and most of you are saying never. So my next question, and this is just going to be like a short, a word or a couple words or a phrase. If you are one of the people who either never negotiates or you're saying sometimes, what words or phrases describe what is holding you back? Why might you not decide to negotiate an offer? Again, whether you've been in that position or not. Oh, haha, that's why. Now you have it. Having enough experience. I'm assuming that's probably worried that I don't have enough experience to warrant negotiating. Fear, yeah. Apprehension. Looks like assuming you need more experience under your belt, I think is what's coming through here before you can do that. Unsure, you don't. I'm seeing scare away, I think, and I'm guessing that's you don't want to scare the employer away from them making an offer or hiring you. Yeah. Knowing the fundamentals, I'm guessing means about how to negotiate at all. But again, if I'm not characterizing any of this right, please feel free to drop more information in the chat. Yeah, okay. So I think what I'm seeing the most of is some fear, some apprehension, not having enough experience coming in, feeling like maybe you don't have any leverage to negotiate or ask for more money, not understanding how to do it. Okay. I'm seeing scare and fear and apprehension. Okay, that's why we're here. Excellent. Thank you for participating. And if you would like to, you can feel free to continue. I'm gonna take you a little bit more into what the workplace is looking like. And I'm gonna ask Samantha again just to verify me that we are seeing the right screen.
Yes, we are.
Thank you. Okay. So this is exactly what it is like in the world right now. Candidates are not negotiating. If you looked up 3 different research studies, you would find 3 slightly different numbers, but on average, what we're seeing is that only about 45% of candidates say that they are ready to negotiate. And that encompasses always negotiating or sometimes negotiating, just coming into the door and negotiating. And that's still a pretty high number, but it's definitely less than half, right? It's a pretty small percentage. So one of the things we want to tell you right up front is that employers actually expect it. Again, if you look at different studies, you'll see slightly different numbers, but I'd say roughly 75% of employers are saying that they expect candidates to negotiate when the time comes. So there is a big disparity in what employers think are about to happen and what candidates are worried about. On top of that, it's 2022. We are going through and have gone through the height of COVID. We are experiencing what folks are calling the Great Resignation. People are leaving in droves, their companies. They're leaving with nothing else lined up. People are feeling more empowered than ever to go to a company that will pay them the wage that they deserve, that will offer them benefits, offer them flexible working. And so we are seeing a shift in the power dynamic between employers and candidates. That's actually really something we haven't seen in decades, right? At least. You have, as a prospective employee, more power in this conversation than you might think you have. Employers are more and more willing to go above and beyond for candidates that they think are really worthwhile. And they are losing people left and right. And, companies don't want to lose good talent, but also just really cynically, it costs a lot of money to rehire a person. And the hire process, posting and hiring new people costs companies time and money that they really don't want to be spending. And so if they can find people to fill these positions, they're willing to do a little bit more than you might think. So, is it always going to be appropriate? Maybe not. Are you always going to get a figure that works for you? Probably not. But we do want you to kind of come into this conversation feeling like you do have something to bring to the table, even if it's your first job. So that's kind of the tone setting that we wanted to do coming into this. So we start with knowing your worth. If you're going to ask for what you're worth, you need to know what that is, right? So there are lots of places that you're going to find information to help you do salary research. And it's not all perfect. A lot of this is going to be you consulting multiple sources and figuring out kind of a rough picture of what you think the marketplace looks like. This usually starts at the time of job searching. So as soon as you're starting to look for jobs, you should be thinking about what kind of a salary you want to be making. And that's partly so that you can apply to jobs that you think will pay that salary, right? But you're going to start this research actually in the job posting. So it has been the habit for a long time that you don't know anything about what a job is going to offer until you get to that job offer phase. But in fact, there is a big movement nationwide for companies to be much more transparent about the salaries that are attached to jobs. So right now, this is going state by state, city by city, 7 states and 3 cities require salaries to be advertised along with the job posting. And as of April 2022, that includes New York City. It also includes Connecticut. So if you are starting to do a job search in the New York tri-state area, it's very likely that you will actually start to see the exact salaries posted with those jobs. So some of the mystery should be taken away. And there are movements across the country for this to be happening in all states and federally. So I'm hopeful that this landscape will continue to evolve in that way. But you will be able to start right with the job posting. We're really excited about that.
All right, thank you, Lynn. I'm all situated on this end, so ready to rock and roll here. All right, so we're gonna get started with some resources that all of you should use in your research that Lynn was just referring to when it comes to salary negotiation. So there's really 2 categories of resources. The first that we have here are for comprehensive research. So to really do a deep dive on what you would get paid in a particular role in a particular industry. These are the go-to resources we're recommending, starting with jobsearchintelligence.com. It's a wonderful resource that produces data and makes it easily accessible. That's what they're all about. And they specifically specialize in salary data, as well as quantitative analysis of compensation factors and labor market analytics. So they're very credible, and they get their data through a number of ways, but mainly it's through surveys that represent over 400,000 US businesses. And they also make sure to have over 50 different resources within a wide range of government agencies and educational institutions like the Department of Labor and the US Census. So this is a really credible resource to use in your search for, to determine what salary you should be looking for when you go to do research on the market. And the thing to call out here about Job Search Intelligence is their salary calculator. So they've got a few different resources, not just for candidates in the job market, but also for employers. But the one to highlight is their salary calculator. You would answer a lot of specific questions about your background as well as the role that you're looking for. And those things can look like the location that you're looking for, the number of years experience you have, the school that you go to, even by name, your GPA, for example. So it gets very granular and it gives you a very specific number as a result. It's a top-notch resource to use, so definitely start there when you're going to do some deep dive research. A couple of other resources to point out are, of course, salary.com. Can't forget that one. And in particular here, their personal salary report. So that's a resource that, again, will allow you to do a deep dive on your unique needs. Really what this is, it will make it customized to your personal attributes and a specific job that you found. So it does, in this case, require you, if you're using the tool, to have a job picked out already that you've actually found on a company website, a legitimate position that's posted. And then bring that to this report. You're going to fill out a lot of different fields and submit information. You also will need to create an account in the website. It looks like you'll create a profile to have all of your information stored there. And for this particular resource on salary.com, they get their data through compensation surveys with lots of different reputable data firms, as well as department sourced data from thousands of companies. So again, really reputable source, good to use. I believe the only drawback with this source, unlike Job Search Intelligence, is that it seems like it does cost a little bit of a fee in order to use it. So I'm not entirely 100% sure on that. I was able to find some suggestion of that on their website, but it would probably be a little bit more expensive, on the expensive side, to have to use that compared to Job Search Intelligence. However, this leads me to our third mention here, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, or NACE's, salary surveys. And so NACE, just to describe it for a moment, is a professional association connecting over 13,000 individuals, career services professionals, employers, and recruiting professionals. And they are also the leading source of info on employment of the college educated. So we get a lot of our information from them, and they inform our practices and what we do for all of you. They publish a lot of content, but specifically here, I mentioned the salary surveys. And so some past semester salary surveys are eventually made public. I think there at the moment is one published online for anybody to use from winter 2022, for example. But the current salary surveys for this semester and upcoming semesters won't be released until after the semesters have passed. So you could get an idea of what the salary range is for a particular job in the market by looking at past salary surveys, but it won't be, as accurate and up to date as something current. Now, the other thing to do is to look at blog posts that they have on their website describing some of the predicted salary ranges or projections for the upcoming graduating class, which they do every year. So you can also even Google that and find that information there.
It's worth noting also that anything that's kind of behind an account or paywall, so to speak, on that site, if you're interested in it, it's very reputable, but we in the Career Center can certainly help you access data if you're looking for it.
Absolutely. Okay, and so on to the second category of resources, these additional tools that some of you likely have heard of already if you've researched for a job, even without looking at salary. These are some well-known websites to use for salary in particular. Ideally here, the idea with both of these slides is that you're looking at multiple resources to help you make an educated guess as to what it is that you should be asking for in your range when it comes time to negotiate. And so that's what we're helping you be prepared with here, these different resources that you'd use for research, not only to learn about what you're worth in the market, but what might be a competitive offer and how you could potentially negotiate an offer, but also a raise, down the line. So these are really dense resources. There's a lot to review with each of these. I'm just going to give some highlights on the things to know about each website listed here. We already talked a little bit about salary.com, but the main feature that is free to use on their website is the salary wizard. And so this is what you would come across if you just Googled or went right to salary.com. It's very prevalent on their website. You would just go there and search by job title and likely a location as well as city and state. And this will give you a generic idea about what a salary for a particular role is within a particular area. There are a few fields that you can also sort by to help filter that down a little bit. But again, it will be generic since you're not creating a profile and having the salary tailored to any particular attributes because there's no additional piece of personalization here. The other website, of course, to note is Indeed. You're probably all very familiar with this because it's a major job board, but there's a way to look at salary on Indeed. You can look at top paying jobs and you can also look by industry. And often those salaries that they post there, sometimes by example for certain job titles are actually because there are job postings with those salaries. So it's kind of a way to kind of sweep you into also looking at jobs through the site. Their salary calculator is another resource to use. You can use it to see how you compare to different people with the same title in the market. And this is very similar with Glassdoor, which is the third website listed there. You need to add a review though, or add a salary in order to view detailed information about salary information. So that's not unlike also LinkedIn, which I have also put on here, where you'll need to give information in order to receive it. So in order for you to be able to use their salary tools, their calculator, their entire page on LinkedIn is dedicated to salary information. You have to submit what your salary is in order to get that information back. I would say that LinkedIn is a pretty reputable source as well, because like Lynn mentioned, there's more and more states who are required to post salaries and job descriptions. So there's more and more people who have that visible in their profile, or rather through the job postings that they may see. And therefore it allows everybody to kind of jump on that. And you can see as a candidate what a typical salary is more readily. And then the last couple of things to note here about different ways to know what your worth is. You can also look at industry-specific online communities. So what do I mean by that? Well, an example of this is actually Handshake. Believe it or not, you can go onto Handshake and search within their giant list of questions. There's like a whole community on there which is, I think, an often unseen tool that Handshake does have available. But you can go in and just search in their questions, I guess, area, any type of question you have. So it doesn't just have to be salary related, but I did this the other day. I looked up the word salary and a bunch of questions came up for specific companies even, but also just in general, how to answer questions about negotiating salary and specifically salaries at certain companies or for specific positions. So that's a great way to get feedback from people who are actually in the field and doing this in real time. And the other thing to do, aside from looking at Handshake, is to see what other online communities might have that kind of information available. And one I can think of is Wall Street Oasis. It's a great resource for finance students, and they have a whole section on their career section about salaries by even job title within different roles or different industries, different components of finance. So there's communities like that for probably a lot of different industries, but Wall Street Oasis is one. And then lastly, your network or mentor. So maybe there's somebody that you're really close with or that you are hoping to be a little bit more close with, in the way that you can connect with them through maybe LinkedIn or somebody that you already know pretty well is by asking them questions about a job. And maybe one of those happens to be, what should I be asking for and for the role that I'm hoping to achieve? Or what is typically, what do you suggest that I do in order to handle this negotiation? Or what might you think a typical range in this market is, should I be asking for? So using your network and plugging your mentor is always a good idea.
Awesome. Thanks, Samantha. So just a note before we share with you some additional tools, one of the things you want to think about as much as you can, it's sometimes a little bit of a mystery, but is your gross pay versus your net pay. So your gross pay is the total compensation. And most of the time when you get an offer, that's what they're referring to. So they might say, we're offering you $60,000 for this position. That is going to be the total that you make. And before that paycheck hits your bank, there are deductions that come out of that paycheck. So your net pay is what you actually take home. And so when you're thinking about what a position pays and you're thinking about how much you need to make, you want to be thinking as much as you can about what is my actual take home going to look like if they offer me this figure. So just a not fully comprehensive, but a slightly helpful list, I hope, about things that come out of your paycheck. It's more than you might think. And not all of this will apply to you. There's lots of different things that can happen, different combinations of deductions that you might get, but just some things that you may or may not be aware of. And I've sort of categorized them by how much control you have over what's coming out of your paycheck, right? So the first most important thing is taxes. Federal, state, and local taxes will come out of your paycheck. FICA is Social Security and Medicare. If your role is a union role or you're a union member, your union dues may come out of your paycheck automatically. Anything like child support, alimony, sometimes those things are automatic deductions. Wage garnishment is a thing that could happen if you default on loans, if you owe back taxes. There's circumstances where the government can just forcibly make you pay by taking it right out of your paycheck. Again, hopefully not all of this applies, but if those are things that happen, then they're just things that get taken out. You don't have control over whether or not they are taken out of your paycheck, and you don't really have control over the amount, right? So you fall in a tax bracket, and that's the amount of tax that comes out of your paycheck. Some things you have some control over if your position and your company offer healthcare benefits and you take advantage of those through that specific employer, your healthcare premiums will come right out of your paycheck. And you do have some control there. You're sort of tied to whatever plans the employer has chosen, but usually they identify at least a few and they give you options, and some cost more than others and they cover different things. So you'll have a little bit of control over which plan you might take and how much that premium is. There are things like disability insurance, life insurance that you can take advantage of if you wish. And again, sometimes you can choose whether or not you're going to participate and how much. So sometimes you can decide, I'm going to pay in this much to a life insurance policy. Thank you to whoever is dropping some resources for each other in the chat. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, which I just saw come up in the chat, is a great option for a lot of this research as well. So thank you for pointing that out. If you have a pension through that role, some employers will have the deduction happen automatically out of your paycheck, and sometimes you'll have some control over that and sometimes you won't. So that's the some control. And then some things you have total control over. If your employer offers you a retirement option like a 401k or a 403b, you can decide whether or not you put money into that, and you can decide how much. My pitch to you is the earlier you start saving in your retirement account, the better, because it's not just you saving. Retirement accounts are on the markets. So that money gets invested in stocks and bonds and mutual funds, and it makes you money while you do it. Some employers also have a match program. So if you put money in, they'll put money in. Up to a percentage of your salary. And that's just more free money getting invested for you. So I would say, even if it's literally $5 a paycheck, if you start participating in that as early as you possibly can, it's really a wonderful option. But you do not have to. It's entirely under your control. There are options like flexible spending, which are other types of accounts that maybe you can use for healthcare expenses, things like that. That's pre-tax dollars that get set aside, transit benefits. So there's lots of these other kinds of benefits where your company will offer you the opportunity to set money aside pre-taxes. So it's not a taxable income amount, and then you can spend that on specific things. And it's totally up to you whether you use those. So you can see that there's a really complicated matrix of options that participate in what your gross pay is versus your net pay. It's hard to really identify what it's going to look like until you get a paycheck or two and see. There is a little link in the bottom left of this slide that is one option. There's a few things out there that are calculators. And some of them, none of them is super comprehensive. You still have to really know, like it'll say things like other pre-tax deductions. Well, you have to know what you're talking about and what those amounts are going to be, right? But you can give it a shot. And this might also hopefully bring up some questions that you can ask at the interview stage or at the offer stage when it comes to evaluating your total compensation package.
Wonderful overview. I'm learning something here myself. All right, so we're going to talk about defining your need and building a budget. So some of you might have familiarity with this if you've taken it upon yourself to build your own budget. Maybe that's the way that you keep your money organized, and we're going to strongly recommend that you do that. Maybe get in the practice of that now, but especially once it comes time to have a full-time position after graduation or down the road. It's an absolutely important need to keep organized and help you figure out, what is it that you are worth, and therefore what is it that you need, and what's your range within that. And we'll talk about that a little bit on the next slide. But in terms of building a budget, so this is going to help you decide how to arrive at a baseline salary. What is it that you need to live comfortably? It's entirely made up of your income and expenses. That's really the basics of what a budget is. And so starting with your sources of income. So what is it that you have coming in the door? When you have a full-time position, it's your salary that's, your source of income. And then, another example of that could be gifts that you receive. There's just a few things, that would make up that category. And so really the way that we're going to recommend tracking that, there's a lot of different tools out there that we'll show on the next slide, but it can help to have a list. It can help to have an Excel spreadsheet, to keep yourself organized in one way or another, and track it week to week, track it month to month, to help you, again, realize what it is that you have coming in the door. And then expenses, fixed versus variable. So an example of fixed expenses might be rent, monthly rent that you pay for an apartment, or insurance bills, phone bill. Variable expenses like gas and groceries, food that you purchase, any leisure activities, things that vary from week to week and month to month. Vacations, that's also an expense that can be variable. And so really tracking those things in their own individual category will help you realizing, what do you have, what's the net, what do you have left over after all is said and done. And the goal here is to have a plan, set yourself up for success, and have a plan that works for you and your lifestyle and live within your means. And in order to do that, it requires you to monitor your spending and make adjustments. So it might take a little bit of time to come up with, the right way to live comfortably and again within your means. But in order to stay on top of that, you want to make sure that you're aware of your spending, that you categorize your expenses, and then figure out where your money is going. And so which directions, what's coming in, what's going out. And then ultimately your goal will also be to build savings. So like Lynn was mentioning on the previous slide, building savings and having a retirement plan for later in life. And so some resources to do this, as I was alluding to, there's lots of stuff out there. I think that when it comes to managing your money, you need to do what makes sense for you and what is most comfortable for you. So maybe, like I was saying, that is making a list in Excel, having a spreadsheet that you can use to track your expenses weekly or monthly, annually. And there are lots of templates already built into Excel that you can use for free. So you can open a new sheet, see the different variety of templates in there, and just, set yourself off with using something that already exists. So it's a really accessible way to have your budget set up, and also it can give you some good experience in Excel. So if you're a business student, because that's the group of students that I work with, definitely a great way to learn some other skills in Excel. There's nerdwallet.com, another great website, smartasset.com, also great. Budgeting apps, there's a lot of different budgeting apps out there. So I recommend, just like you would with hopefully anything else that you're doing for the first time, take a look at reviews, see what app is most well reviewed, and then use that regularly. Sometimes it can be really helpful to have that on hand instead of trying to remember what your budget might look like if your spreadsheet's saved on a computer or tablet, and then trying to go back to your phone. Sometimes it's really just helpful to have it on hand, and so that's where a budget app can be really useful. And then bank websites. So banks have some, at least structure that you can get you started with, maybe building your own budget spreadsheet or setting yourself up in an app. But there's, in general, the feeling around the slide is that there's a lot of free stuff out there that can help you set you up for success when it comes to budgeting. And really the idea with all of what we've said so far, but especially when it comes to budgeting, is helping you develop a range between what you need and what you're worth. So when it comes to interviews, when the salary conversation comes around, hopefully you're providing a range, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the next few slides, of what is on the lower end of your range, meaning what you need. Ideally, that's comprised of expenses and savings, but also spending money on top of that. So that's kind of ideally on the lower end of your range. And then on the higher end is the amount that you're worth, based on the research you've done on the market, from all the resources provided on the previous slides. And maybe it's a little bit higher in some cases than what an employer might come at you with when it comes to negotiation. So that's what we're helping you set up yourselves for here. And I'll let Lynn take it away to describe how this whole negotiation process works a little bit more.
Absolutely. Thanks, Samantha. And it's a delicate thing, but you do want to come up with a range, and depending on how, where you are in your career, if it's super early or you're a little bit more advanced in your career, that could be a range of maybe $5,000. Sometimes it's $8,000 or $9,000. But you do want to kind of come in with a general range, and it really doesn't hurt to nail down a figure that you'd really like to be offered within that as well. So just some things that you think about as you're going. So when the time comes, you get an offer. Now, the salary conversation can come up at almost any time from interview to offer. And that's why you really want to start this research before you even start applying, but certainly before you walk into an interview, you want to have that range or that figure in your head. Sometimes at the screening phase, like the very first interview you ever have, is often a quick half-hour conversation on the phone or maybe by Zoom. And a lot of employers at that point will give you an idea of what the job will offer, or will at least ask you, what are your salary requirements? So you want to be prepared for that conversation right up front. Sometimes they will go through the whole interview process and the number won't even come up until the offer range. And hopefully you all know at this point that if the employer doesn't initiate that conversation in the interviews, it's still considered not super appropriate for you to ask the question. Again, you've got more power in this conversation than you've ever had before. So if you find an in that feels professional and appropriate to start asking the question, I'm not going to tell you not to. But the most conservative wisdom is that if they don't bring it up, you don't address it until the end. So it may come up in the beginning, it may come up sometime during the interview, and then it definitely will come up when they make an offer, right? So the employer is going to make you an offer. It's going to come with a figure, and it should also come with information. It used to be called an offer package because you literally got an envelope that had all the documentation in it. Now, probably everything's on their website or hidden behind some kind of employee portal, but it should come with all the information that we talked about earlier, like healthcare options and retirement options, so you can just really evaluate all the things at your disposal. So the offer comes in, and let's say it's less than you were hoping, because if it is exactly on the money or even a little bit higher, it's up to you if you still want to ask for more. There is absolutely a strategy in that, right? Some people have a philosophy of just, I always ask for more no matter what. And again, the first thing I want to say to you is employers are expecting negotiation. A lot of times when they are formulating the figure that they offer you, they're also working with a range. Every position has a salary range. There is never one specific number. And so they are often identifying something in the low end, like the bottom 25% of that position, knowing A, that you may negotiate and they may need to build in more budget for it, and B, that over time, you're likely to get some kind of increases, some kind of raises in that. So they're coming in at probably a lower end of the range, and they are expecting negotiation. If you ever get an employer that seems really put off by you asking for more, I think you should note that as a flag, that if people are not willing to engage in a conversation about what you're worth, then you know that, right? I once heard somebody say an employer who declines to negotiate is still negotiating. Right? They're still playing hardball with you. They're just declining to even enter the conversation. And that's information that you need. One thing I really, really want to reassure you about is the offer is safe. A lot of people, and I saw this in your responses earlier, so thank you for contributing that. A lot of people are worried that if they get an offer and then they come back and they say, I'd like some more money, please, that the employer is going to run away and just say, no, thank you. I'm rescinding this offer. This isn't right for us. We're going to go with another candidate. That is so unlikely to happen. The most likely scenario, if they can't offer you more, is that they're going to come back and say that they can't, but this is the offer on the table. Again, if you ever encounter an employer who suddenly is put off by that conversation and decides that they don't want to move forward with you, you've learned something about what's happening at that company. You've learned that advocating for yourself is discouraged and received that way. And I feel like that's a big red flag, right? So this really should be a friendly conversation that they've been expecting. Please also know that your asking for more money does not mean that you're not interested, that you're not valuable, and that you are just greedy asking for more money, right? And no employer thinks that. This is entirely about what the work is worth. And the other thing I want to tell you is that you actually never know. So sometimes in a conversation, especially up front when they make the offer, an employer might say something like, this is the budget I've been given for the role. There's no more room for that. Please don't take that as a sign that you cannot negotiate. You can always acknowledge that phrase. You can say, I know that you indicated that there probably wasn't room, but I do want to broach the subject. Because sometimes there is more money there and they're just trying to preclude you from asking for more. But if you ask for more, they need to entertain it. And sometimes the hiring managers don't always know. Sometimes a hiring manager has been given a figure. And if they go back and say, I have an amazing candidate, but they might walk away from this, or they are asking for more, or they need an increase over what they were making before. And that's where we are. Sometimes whoever else has authority over this will come back and say, okay, we can find a little more money, right? So you actually never know what it's going to look like institutionally. And there is really no harm in asking. Again, if somebody suddenly gets scared off, then you have information about that. So, you may find signals throughout the interview process that tell you, I really shouldn't negotiate here. But I would say to you, there's really no harm in asking. And this is the first point of entry into you advocating for yourself and what you're worth. The other thing I can tell you, especially those of you who are thinking about your first job, people who are underpaid in their first job statistically will make significantly less over their lifetime than those who are paid at market or over market. And so that first salary that you make is actually a really important level setter for what the rest of your career is going to look like. Can you ever make that up if you're underpaid? Yes, you can. But the statistics, the data show us that those folks tend to be underpaid a lot of their career, right? So let's advocate for ourselves and get that first salary under our belt so that we're really set up for success later. So if you need a pep talk, if you need permission to just go ahead and ask for something, please consider this the permission. There was a little conversation in the chat I saw about internship. And so I should say, we're talking here really about full-time professional work in your field. Internship salaries are actually rarely negotiable. They are budgeted. However, should you feel based on your need, like I really can't afford to do an internship otherwise, you can always ask the question in the interview process. But like, I would just be aware that usually internship salaries are not negotiable. And I know Samantha answered that in a great way. Hourly rates for internships are not usually negotiable, but I do see some chat. I think that's Penelope. Is that your first name? Saying, maybe there's room. Thank you. Maybe there's room. So again, like, these are questions that if you ask them the right way are never going to be frowned upon. So how do you even do it? Okay, so the first thing we do is we respond to the offer positively. Thank you so much. I am so excited to receive this offer. I'm really enthused about this position, whatever you want to say, because if you're worried that asking for more money makes you seem unenthused about the position, we head that off at the pass. I'm so excited about this. Thank you. The second thing to know about responding to the offer is you do not have to answer the question immediately. So you never have to say right away, yes or no. You never have to say right away, is there wiggle room? You can always ask for a few days, and you probably want those few days because you're going to do a few things. One is you're going to review all the other pieces of the offer. It's not just salary. We talked about all kinds of stuff, benefits, perks. You might need to consider all those options. You might need to talk it over with somebody, right? To see if this is really going to fit into the lifestyle and the budgeting that you've already been looking at. So it's always a good idea to take a couple days. And that is exactly how you would say it. Would you mind? I would really like a couple days just to review the offer, see if I have any questions. It's a big commitment. So nobody is going to be upset if you take a little time. You can't drag it out, and you can say, when do you need to hear back from me? But usually I would recommend like 2 or 3 days. So sometimes if the offer comes on a Friday, you might say, can I take the weekend, get back to you Monday or Tuesday? And that gives you a little time to sort of look everything over. If you decide at that point, I need to negotiate, either because I should advocate for myself, even if this figure is pretty good, or because you're like, I can't afford this, right? I really need more to live. And really I was hoping for even more than just getting by, right? So you come back, and I'm going to give you a phrase that you can customize however you wish. But one of the good things to rely upon is based on my research and qualifications. Based on my research and qualifications, I was expecting something more like X. And if you need to, you can reiterate it. If you need to, be ready to cite your research, right? You want to have a couple of stats at your fingertips. You want to be able to send them that, because sometimes the hiring manager might say, send that over to me, I'll talk to my people, right? So have some research at the ready, and then don't be afraid to remind them of some of the qualifications you're bringing. And if you are an entry-level person, you have just graduated college and you don't feel that you have a ton of experience under your belt, that's okay. Whatever you have done during college, I bet you there's something that makes you unique, that makes you special, that you're bringing to the table, that you deserve bragging rights about. And if you're ever concerned about what that is, or you need a confidence boost or a pep talk, that's what our career coaches are here for, to help you really position yourself well in this conversation. But you want to just say that. Now, sometimes, every now and then, it's appropriate and okay to talk about your need, right? I really can't afford to take a pay cut that large, for instance, something like that. But you want the focus of this conversation to be the value that you're bringing to the table and not what you need. This is now about the employer, right? And what you are going to provide to them and what they should be ready to pay for it. So based on my research and qualifications, I was really hoping for or expecting something more like this. Is there room for negotiation? Is there any room on this offer? Please remember that I am so excited. I just want to reiterate that this is a wonderful position. It's not, about that, but I really would like to have a conversation about the number. Now, the other thing you can think about is it doesn't have to be necessarily the salary or just the salary that you negotiate. A lot of things like healthcare, vacation time or paid time off, PTO, perks, things like that are also things that you could negotiate. So if they really come back and say we have no wiggle room on salary, you might be able to ask for something else. Or you might find that the salary feels just fine to you, but there are a couple things about the benefits or the perks that you really were hoping for. In this day and age, perhaps it's a remote work option or a flexible schedule. A lot of other companies are offering that. I was really expecting that at this point. So there's lots of other things that you could look at negotiating as well. And then please try to approach this like a friendly conversation, because in reality, even if they seem like they're playing hardball, that's what employers are expecting at this point. At this point, they've made an offer, they see your value, they're communicating that. And this is now a friendly conversation where you are trying to come to a mutual agreement about your work arrangement at their company. Again, they should not be running away from this. They should not be standoffish about it or rude about it. And if they are, you've learned something about them that you can consider in your offer. During negotiation, should I give an exact number or can I say my expected range? That's going to depend entirely on what they've come to you with. So either is fine. Say they come to you at $50,000 and you were like, I really wanted to come in at 60,000. Now there's a calculation to make. Am I going to be able to get 10,000 more out of these people? You could ask, because most people come in low, so you come in high. So you have this little dance and you meet in the middle. But you also might say, well, it's a little unrealistic if they're coming in at 50 that they're going to get to 60. You could say, I was, based on my research and qualifications, I was really expecting something around 60,000. Is there any room, even above 50, right, to get to that? You could choose something in the middle. You could say I was really expecting something more like 57, right? So that's about your strategy. You can also give a range, but at this point, I would not give a big range. I would give a small range. I was expecting something in the mid 50s. I was expecting something in the high 50s. I was thinking something like 57 to 59. Is that doable? So I would get narrower at this point. But a specific figure is perfectly appropriate. You're offering me 50. I was really expecting 55. Can we have a conversation about it? I hope that helps.
Lynn, can I ask a follow-up question?
Please.
What about in an interview if the candidate is asked by the hiring managers what their range is or what they're looking for?
Yeah, that's
what
really
kind of
common.
answer?
So before the offer, that will happen. When they make the offer, they're going to tell you a number, right? But before the offer, during the interview process, if they say, so what are your salary expectations, which is super common, that's the point at which I would cite a range. You can cite a figure also because it gives them a general idea. But at that point, that's when I would bring your maybe $4,000 to $5,000 range. And again, you can say things like low, mid, high also, if you want to say like I'm expecting low 60s or mid 60s, something like that. But usually what you want to do is say, here's my range, and be honest. Please be honest about it. Here's my range. But I'm looking for the right position. You always want to couch it. I'm looking for the right position. I'm really open to conversation or open to negotiation on it. And again, please don't be scared of that question or scared of giving your honest answer, because in reality, you and your employer are both looking for an arrangement that will work for you both. If they're going to severely underpay you, it might not be good for either of you, right? So they really honestly are looking for people who are going to fall in the range of the position. And if that's not you, it is extremely rare that they're going to come back and say, well, then we probably just shouldn't move forward. Most of the time, they're going to have the conversation with you first. So they're going to say something like, just so you know, this is the range for this position. I want to give you an opportunity to think about it before we continue down the interview path. And honestly, if your employer does that, that's a wonderful, transparent employer, and you should note that as well. We've talked about some red flags. That's a green flag to me. I'm no bones, I'm trying to just make sure that this is a clear communication and worthwhile conversation for us to keep having. So please feel free to cite the range and see what they do, and they will probably just come back with some feedback for you if needed. During negotiating a job offer, what is included in this compensation package? So lots of stuff. We covered a little bit of it, Tatiana, earlier in the deductions, because the deductions really tend to correspond to, other than things like taxes, although that's a different kind of long-term societal benefit that you may realize somewhere else. The rest of them are direct benefits to you. So things like healthcare, retirement, any like transportation perks, perhaps, life insurance, those kinds of things. And then there are perks as well that may be offered depending on the industry. And perks range widely. Perks can be like a free lunch. Perks can be like a car when you need it. Now we're talking business and corporate and probably higher level positions at that point, but like there are all kinds of perks. Some of them are extra vacation days, a lot of it is PTO. Those are the benefits you should look at as well, paid time off. So at a minimum, what you're looking at is your health benefits, your paid time off, and your retirement options. That's like at the minimum. So you're going to see, and if you don't get that information, you should absolutely ask for it. You can write back to the person and say, who can I talk to about benefits? I'd like to examine those before I make a decision here. All right, and then you have to make a call. So you've done your due diligence, you've brought it in, you've had a really friendly professional conversation where you said, I'm so excited about this. I just would love to revisit the salary if there's room for that. Based on my research and qualifications, I was expecting something more like X, etc. And then they come back and sometimes there's a bit of a back and forth. And now, by the way, sometimes this is on the phone, sometimes it's by email, sometimes it's in person. So it can be a limited time conversation where for like a half hour, you're just going back and forth and you resolve something. Sometimes it stretches over days. So just be prepared for stages of that process. But usually there's like a couple back and forths. And then at some point, the employer is saying, this is the offer I can make you. And then you have to make a call. Do you accept that offer or do you walk away? And there's lots of things to consider in this conversation. Here are three big ones. They're not all of them, but they're big ones. So number one, can you afford the offer? Especially if they come back to you with something still lower than you were expecting or really lower than you think you're worth. You really want to look at like, can I live on this? And can I thrive on this? I don't love to rely on like, is this a livable wage, right? Because we know what it's like to just scrape by. That's not the same thing as being able to pay your bills, save a little bit for your future, and be living your best life, right? So can you afford that? Can you afford to live on that, knowing that something around 25% of your pay is going to be taken out before it hits your bank, right? What's the value of this opportunity as a career move? Some people will take a lower salary if this is a really wonderful move for their career. Are you trying to break into your field and this is a really good foot in? Is this an organization that you would just love to work for? And this is really the way in. What's the value of the career move to you? And then can you afford to walk away is the other end of the spectrum, right? Do you need to be making money right now and this is some cash in hand that you wouldn't otherwise have? What are your other job prospects like? Are you getting called in for interviews? Just what's your current situation if you actually just turned this down? There are some nuances in this conversation as well that are kind of like, if this is salary negotiation 101, they might be salary negotiation 201. But you can think about things like sometimes, especially as you progress in your career and you do have more experience behind your belt, you can think about things like, could I take this at this salary, but try to build in to the contract or the agreement or the offer that they evaluate my performance after a year and talk to me about a raise? Or could we put a bonus structure in there or something like that? So there's lots of options to look at, but those are the big three. Can you afford the offer? What is the value of this career move if you took a lower pay cut in the long run? And could you afford even to walk away? So some great stuff in the chat. What about when the hiring manager tells you that they will seek approval of your negotiated value and that your negotiation is not new to them, so that they were expecting it? Oh, but they're asking you, can you accept it while they seek approval of your negotiation? Ooh, that's nuanced. Thank you for this question. So the question is, what if a hiring manager comes back and says, okay, yes, I'm very happy to negotiate with you, but in the meantime, could you just kind of tell me, could you give me a verbal yes or no? That depends on so many things, but I would think about a couple. One is a verbal yes or no does not commit you to anything. At some point, they're going to ask you to respond in writing, and then they're going to ask you to file a bunch of paperwork. So it's fine to say yes or no at this point, like, yes, I would like to accept it at this point, but I would be very, very clear when you say that. I'm excited about this job and I would love to accept it, but please know that my final acceptance, my official acceptance, may depend on the outcome of our salary negotiation, right? So you don't want them to go, great, I locked them in at 60, because sometimes what it feels like they're trying to do is go, well, I just want to get a yes on the books, and then, maybe we'll try to negotiate and maybe we won't be able to, right? And so you don't want to get locked into that either, but you also don't want to lose an offer if it's really exciting to you, especially if they're close to what you're looking for and you just need to bump them up a little bit. So I think it's okay to say, I would love to accept this, but please know that before that becomes something official in writing or there's paperwork involved, that I need to reserve the right to make a final decision based on the outcome of our salary negotiation. It is also fine to say, I appreciate that you need an answer from me, but I'm more comfortable giving you an answer based on the outcome of our negotiation. That is okay. Again, at this point, they're probably not going to walk away from you based on that alone, right? At the end of the day, they're going to come to you and say, this is what we can offer, take it or leave it, and then you make your call. I'm particular, yes. So if you're talking about signing your name to anything, I would not sign anything that doesn't have a final offer. So the verbal, there's some wiggle room. I would not put a thing in writing or sign anything or submit paperwork, because then you're done. Then you're sealed in at that level. If they want to go try to figure out some negotiation, that's up to them. You have given away all your power in the situation. So yes, absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that. I would not sign a thing. Yes, I think Aspers was saying something to that effect in the chat. I accepted an offer in the past and attempted negotiation afterwards. I was told that once an offer is accepted and signed, negotiation is not possible, but that there may be a raise over time. That is exactly what will happen. And let me tell you about that raise over time. Unless it's built into a contract, there's no guarantee, right? People will say that to you to get you in the door, but you've given all your power away once you sign your name. Absolutely. These are wonderful questions, guys, and that's the end of our planned content. I know we're a little over. I really, really appreciate you staying with us. If you have more questions, keep them coming. We have a few more minutes for you. And again, this is like the intro to stuff. There are deep, detailed conversations about how to manage this. I did put up a QR code. If you could just take a few minutes and submit our survey, this helps us make sure that we're offering you really quality education. But do please know that our coaches are here for these conversations. If you want more programming that does a deeper dive, please let me know. I'm always here for what students need in programming. And also know that we are here to just help you find your power in the conversation, know your worth, argue for your worth in the conversation. So please do, if you've got more questions, throw them in the chat, unmute. Samantha's dropping some email opportunity in there. These are wonderful questions and also wonderful advice. Thank you, students, for helping each other out. We are not, the be all end all. There's so many resources out there. Thank you so much. I'm going to end the recording here, but we're here for a little bit.